The history of Anatolia is associated with many great civilizations of world history. However, the more recent history was written by the Turks, who have inhabited and ruled Anatolia for roughly a millennium. It is commonly believed that at some point during the Crusades, the Seljuk Turkish tribe migrated to Anatolia, fought a few wars against Byzantium, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, the Ottomans appeared, conquered Constantinople, and rose to become a world empire. But history is not that simple. Such an account implies that, apart from the Seljuks and the Ottomans, there were no other Turkish empires or principalities, or at least that they were not worthy to be mentioned, and that only the Seljuks and the Ottomans influenced Turkish history. But in order to understand why Turkey is inhabited by most people belonging to the Turkish ethnic group, why Turkish culture became so dominant, and how the fall of the Seljuks is related to the rise of the Ottomans, we need to look at the very period that is largely ignored in media portrayals. For after the fall of the House of Seljuk and before the establishment of the Ottoman Sultanate, Anatolia was divided into many smaller states, the so-called beyliks. Anatolia has been inhabited by many different peoples over the course of thousands of years. The Indo-Germanic Hittites once ruled over large parts of the Countiel from present-day Ankara and fought epic battles with the Egyptians, resulting in the world's first recorded peace treaty. Later, the ancient Greeks colonized mainly the western coast of Anatolia, and thus interacted with the peoples of the Near East. After that, the Persians and Macedonians ruled Anatolia for a while, until the Romans appeared. After the disintegration of Rome, the so-called Eastern Roman Empire split off. Constantinople, formerly called Byzantium, blossomed into the navel of the world. Its rulers, the Greco-Roman Byzantines, remained unchallenged rulers of Anatolia for centuries. Even the Arabs, after proclaiming their caliphate, could not take possession of this cosmopolitan city. It was considered untouchable, until the Turks arrived, that is. Their rulers were called Bey. They shaped the destiny of Anatolia for about 2 centuries, from Bithynia to the Aegean, from Lydia to Pontus, and from the Black Sea to the southeasternmost part of Anatolia, before the Ottoman Empire took over. They were sometimes friendly, and often hostile, to each other. A beylik was, roughly translated, a principality. The root word, bey, is used today as a form of address for sir, much as it is in English. Originally, however, it meant, beg. This was the name given to the leaders of Turkic tribes in Asia, especially at the time of the Göktürks in the 6th and 7th centuries. And this brings us to the Seljuks. Before they migrated to Anatolia, the Seljuks represented a branch of the Oğuz Federation. The Oğuz had been a collection of 24 Turkic tribes who, after the demise of the Göktürks, had made their way westward, settling at the ARALSEA. A lake that has dried up over the past decades and is practically non-existent today. In the 8th century, this region became not only the new home of the Oğuz, but also the breeding ground of new powerful Turkish empires. 4 of the 24 tribes that formed the federation, some are considered to be the ancestors of certain Turkish dynasties. Thus Seljuk, the namesake of the later Great Seljuk Empire, belonged to the Oğuz tribe of Kinik. After the death of his father, he had risen to become their beg. The Kinik were probably also the first Oğuz Turks to convert from Tengrism to Islam. Seljuk sons bore names like Mikhail and Israel. When war broke out in the neighborhood between the Turkic Karakhanids and the Persian Samanids, the Oğuz could not reach a unified position in the conflict. This was probably the final reason for Seljuk's departure from the other tribes. His Kinik tribe left the federation and migrated south. Beginning with Khorasan, his sons and successors, most notably Tural Beg, conquered new grazing lands, but also settled down to some extent. Tural, which means falcon, was even given the honorary title of Sultan by the Abbasid Caliph, after he brought Iran and Iraq under his control. He had defeated the Turkic Ghaznavid Sultanate prior. The Turks suddenly became a powerful faction in the Middle East, which had been divided into small pieces for centuries. Tural was fully aware of this. His nephew, the famous Alp Arslan, as Sultan of the new Great Empire, defeated the Byzantines at the Battle of Manzikert in 1071. It had actually been a symbolic victory, but Alp Arslan thereby laid the foundation for the conquest of Anatolia. While the Seljuks had triggered the Crusades in Palestine, they incidentally pushed the Byzantines out of large parts of Anatolia after centuries, eventually stopping short of Constantinople, much like the Persians and Arabs before them. But the Seljuks did not come alone, because the other tribes of the Oğuz Federation had also set out after Tural Beg's successes. The majority of them gradually migrated into Anatolia around 1100. The Sultanate of the Great Seljuks disintegrated in the 12th century, but the dynasty of Seljuk, Tural, Alp Arslan and company had set in motion two major developments. First, the Crusades of the West against the Muslim states in the Levant. Second, the migration of Turkish families from the ARALSEA through the Near East to the gates of Constantinople. As a result, there was massive socio-economic upheaval in Anatolia. But the Turks changed not only the face of their new homeland, but also their own. By mixing with the natives, their genes changed, thus their appearance, but above all parts of their culture. Although the Central Asian elements of Tur and Tengrism, meaning Turkish tradition and religion, have survived in Turkish society to this day, an adaptation to local conditions took place. In the 13th century, the majority of Anatolians were of Turkish Central Asian origin with an Islamic Oriental flavor. Byzantium offered strong resistance, but could not prevent Turkish settlement. Just when the political situation had cleared up, a new power emerged from East Asia, the Mongols. After destroying the Turkic Cumans in Eastern Europe, they invaded Anatolia through the Caucasus, killed the Rum Seljuk Sultan, Kai Kobad I, at the Battle of Koz Dag in 1243, and rose to become the new rulers of Anatolia. Although many principalities and kingdoms yielded to the Mongols out of fear for their safety or even joined them, and the Seljuks never regained power, the East Asians had set in motion a tremendous process that allowed the birth of new Turkic empires. For the hostile conquests on the one hand and the loss of political sovereignty on the other, encouraged many smaller princes to rebel against the Mongols and establish their own states. Gradually, the Beys of Anatolia declared their independence. With the help of resistance fighters from all over Anatolia, but also from occupied Persia, they were able to weaken the power of the oppressors. The Kobanoglu in the north and the Karamanids in the south were among the first. Other factions had moved into western Anatolia, displaced the Byzantines, and declared independence from there, including the Mentesh and Saruhan states. The Mongol Empire famously later split into four major parts, and the Turco-Mongol Ilkhanids, who were supposed to administer the area from Persia to Anatolia, gradually lost their authority. By 1300, most of western Anatolia had been freed from Mongol rule. Among the new beys was a certain Osman, who had established his own duchy near Bursa. Osman's family came from the Kei tribe, who like the ancestors of all the other beys, had also once been part of the Oğuz Federation. Around 1336, all of Anatolia regained its independence. Along with the Empire of Trapezunt on the Black Sea and the Byzantine Empire in Thrace, all of Anatolia was now ruled by the Turkish beys. During the time of the Beyliks, Turkish culture flourished in Anatolia. First, the language. The Seljuks, in the course of their migration through Iran, had declared Persian script the official language at the Sultan's court. The Rum Seljuks in Anatolia held fast to this. But the Beyliks now dropped Persian and declared Turkish the official language in their realms. The first Beylik in which this change became official was that of Karaman. The son of state founder Karaman Bey, a man named Mehmet, declared Turkish the official language by decree on May 12, 1277. His decree literally stated the following: "From now on, no one in the palace, in the ministries, in the council, and in the streets, shall speak any language other than Turkish. This was a revolutionary act, as the other beyliks followed the call. Gradually, Turkish grew to become the lingua franca throughout Anatolia, including the sciences and literature, although it did not completely supplant languages such as Greek, Armenian or Persian. Yunus Emre is considered the most famous of all Turkish poets. He lived in Eskişehir, in northwestern Anatolia, during that very period. His works later significantly influenced the artists and intellectuals of the Ottoman era. In honor of Mehmet, a statue was erected in the eponymous town of Karaman to symbolize his pro-Turkish actions. Apart from the linguistic changes, the Turks began to construct numerous buildings during this period, most notably mosques, in which a new architectural style is evident. With the adoption of the ancient arts that the Seljuks had brought to Anatolia based on Persian, wood and stone carving, roof tiles, and other ornamentation became the new standard. Examples include the İsa Bey Mosque near Izmir, built by the Beyliks of Aydın, and the Medrese, commissioned by Ali Bey of Karaman. But as so often in history, especially in Turkish history, the dukes of Anatolia vied for power. The largest beyliks in area were that of the Karamanids and Eretna. Unlike all the other beyliks, Eretna was ruled by a family said to have been of Uyghur origin. Eretna, the founder of the dynasty and, as usual, the eponym of the new state, had come to Anatolia with the Mongols. He had then revolted against the İlk Khan, then fled to Egypt, obtained a piece of land in eastern Anatolia through a ruler in Azerbaijan and returned, then revolted against Azerbaijan, and finally declared independence. Eretna declared Sivas the capital of his empire and ruled over cities such as Akkara, Amasya and Samsun. He was able to achieve all this thanks to a promise of protection from the Mamluks. The man's eventful history is emblematic of the opportunism that was common in Anatolia at that time. His subjects were pleased with his rule and bestowed upon him, who was a scholar in private, the title of prophet with a thin beard. Eretna's successors were not very successful. After several rebellions, the state disintegrated. In the west as large territories went to the Karamanids and Ottomans, and in the east to the Ikoyanlu. Karaman was able to hold on longer. This beylik was the most powerful state in 14th century Anatolia. The ruling dynasty, but also the co-migrated inhabitants, counted themselves descendants of the Afshar, another tribe of the Oğuz Federation. Having migrated from Azerbaijan to Sivas and from there to the western Taurus Mountains, the Karamanids settled in Cilicia. When the Mongols conquered the Rum Seljuks, Karaman Bey seized the opportunity and marched with his two brothers into Konya, which at that time had been the capital of the Seljuks and the pivot of Anatolian politics. However, with the help of the Mongols, the Seljuks were able to defeat Karaman's army. After his death, Mehmet, whom we mentioned earlier, raised a new army with the help of the surrounding Turkish tribes. In 1277, shortly after the Battle of Göksu, Mehmet marched into Konya. After some back and forth, Konya became the capital of the new Karaman Beylik. Since the Ilkhanids lost authority over Anatolia shortly thereafter, the Karamanids once again seized the opportunity and massively expanded their territory. As a result, wars broke out with the rising Ottomans in the northwest. After some appeasement, the Ottomans faced the threat. Although they lost the battles, after the invasion of the warlord, Timur, known as Tamerlan, he had defeated the Ottomans at Ankara in 1402, many Turkish beyliks regained their territories from the Ottomans, including Karaman. The beylik held out for some time until it was swallowed by the Ottomans in 1468. Karaman had received help from the Ikoyanlu, the other great power in the east. The mother of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the founder of the Republic of Turkey, probably came from the Karaman area. There were many smaller beyliks in Anatolia apart from these great empires. Dulkadir, for example, was composed of the Oğuz tribes of Afshars and Bayat, and ruled southeastern Anatolia. They became pawns in the conflict between Ottomans and Mamelukes. In the far west ruled the family of Saruhan Beg, who had established a small but influential border principality between Mongols in the east and Byzantium in the west. They contributed to the Beyliks' War of Independence. With the rise of the Ottomans, the power of the beyliks declined. During the 15th century, there were fewer and fewer of them. Karaman was the last big beylik to hold out, situated between the Ottomans and Koyunlu. After the Ottomans defeated the Koyunlu in 1473, they extended their rule to the rest of Anatolia. Thus, the era of the beyliks ended forever. For some time now, the Ottomans have dominated the public discourse on Turkish history. But the beyliks are celebrating a return. Their memory may have faded, and yet they are present as never before. Almost every Turkish family whose ancestors actually came from Anatolia can trace a connection to one of the beyliks. Some had ancestors who migrated to Anatolia and settled under the rule of a bey. Others might even claim direct descent from one of the ruling houses. In any case, the beyliks have left a lasting mark on Turkish history and Anatolia. For historians, the least they should do is not to forget them.
Tengrim kovdasın, yer anamım ay korgasın, yer jarılıp şöp bolsun, yeli jarılıp süt bolsun, her bağım jar bolsun, kevdesi dolu ar bolsun. Amin.